Good afternoon. I'd like to bring the regular afternoon meeting of Township Council to order. And the first item is the adoption and receipt of the agenda items. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Arneson, a seconder. Councillor Kunst. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And need a motion to adopt the minutes from the regular afternoon meeting of December the 10th, 2018. Councillor Ferguson, second. By Councillor Arneson. Any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed and carried. And need a motion to resolve into special close for the items on the agenda and on table. Could I have a motion? Councillor Kunst, seconder. Councillor Arneson. Any additions? All those in favor? Don't push your button.
Oh, sorry. Wrong button. It's been too long.
There we go. I know it's been too long a break. That's okay. Councillor Arneson.
Property item, please.
Property? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. All right, good afternoon. Now I'd like to reconvene the regular afternoon meeting of Council. And the next item on the agenda is our presentations. And we have a presentation from Metro Vancouver, reducing particulate matter emissions from open burning in rural areas. So if you please come forward and welcome here.
Short. So good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation to come present to you today. I first made this presentation to Metro Vancouver's Agricultural Advisory Committee in the spring of last year. And they recommended that we actually make the presentation to the 6 municipal agricultural advisory committees. And so that's how I've ended up here, because your committee also suggested that I be invited to come speak here. So this figure I've got up, or the picture that I've got up here, was taken by, first of all, a little bit about me. So I'm an engineer by training and also an atmospheric chemist, and I belong to the Environmental Regulation and Enforcement Division of Metro Vancouver. And so we promote compliance and enforce 3 bylaws: the air quality management bylaw, solid waste bylaw, and there's also a liquid waste bylaw. And I'm responsible for ensuring that we promote compliance with the air quality management bylaw. So that's a little bit of background on me. So this picture was taken by one of our officers who's responsible for Richmond, and it's a picture that is looking north. It was about this time last year, and you can actually see over to the right those buildings that are have the sun reflecting off them. That's Metrotown, so that's also where our head office is. And as you can see here, these are agricultural burns, and they're not great. There's a lot of smoke that's being generated. They're not managing to get much liftoff, so the smoke just isn't dispersing. And I'm here to speak to you today because we're hoping to avoid a repeat of this type of situation. So this is a view of the same thing, and this time it's from our offices. And so this time we are looking, it gives you a bit of a sense, it's the exact same fires that were occurring. And you can see that the smoke is traveling towards the west, and it's actually traveling out towards the airport. And that's important because it just so happens that our ambient monitoring station at the airport picked up an increase, a spike in particulate matter on that day. So I'm going to show you that and talk to you a little bit more about that in a moment. But just a bit more about this. So the officer went out and talked to it. And it turns out it was about 3 cranberry farms that were burning, and they each were burning 1, 2, 4 piles. And 2 of them did have permits from the Richmond Fire Department, and they had phoned that day as required to find out whether or not it was, they phoned Metro Vancouver's line, open burn advisory line, to find out whether or not it was a good day to burn, and it was. So that's part of the issue that we've got here, is that those forecasts are regional forecasts. And clearly on this day, it wasn't a very good forecast for Richmond because the smoke isn't dispersing. So what I'm showing here is a bit complicated. On the left-hand side, the y-axis, is the concentration of what's known as PM 2.5, fine particulate matter. It is so small, it's about 100 times smaller than the thickness of a piece of paper. It is so small you can't actually see it with the naked eye. It does cause some scattering though. And this is, on the x-axis, is time of day, on that day, January 17th. These are 1 minute data points. And we've color-coded it based on wind direction. So the dark blue is winds blowing from the east, the light blue from the southeast, and the green is from the northeast. And what the open burn advisory had said that day is it's okay to start a new burn in the afternoon. And so you can see, if you look along it, the PM concentrations are really very low. I should have said that on the y-axis. It goes from 0 to 20, and Metro Vancouver's ambient objective for PM 2.5 is 25, just to give you a bit of context. So it was very low. It was less than 5. And then you start to see it around 2 o'clock in the afternoon with winds blowing from the east, the direction of those open burns. It starts to increase. And in fact, it really spiked. We picked up a spike, and it was winds blowing from the east. So it could have been a regional phenomenon, not a local phenomenon. So we looked at the what was going on at the other ambient monitoring stations. And here what I'm showing you on the left-hand side is the exact same data, just presented to you in a different way. And on the right-hand side is the same data for the same day, but at Burnaby South. And what this is showing, if you imagine the monitor to be in the very center of these, and it's similar to a compass, and the color coding now is the concentration. So the warmer the color, the higher the concentration. The red is 20, and the colder the color, the blues, are low concentration. And what this is showing pretty clearly is that when the winds were blowing from the east or east-northeast, there was a spike. There was the highest concentrations, but you don't see that at Burnaby South. So what that indicates to us is that it's not a regional phenomenon, it's a local phenomenon. And then what's really interesting on the right-hand side one is that you see some orange associated with winds from the south. And it just so happens that this monitor is located to the north of where the burns were. So it looks like we picked it up at 2 different monitoring stations. So I'm talking a lot about PM 2.5. Why are we concerned about PM 2.5? And especially with open burns. I mean, they're just short-term things. They aren't year-round. What's the concern? Well, although the primary concern with PM 2.5 is the long-term effects and the potential, it reduces life expectancy, there's an increased risk of cancer, but also it affects people with existing breathing conditions. So children with asthma, people with COPD. And what you can see when you have short-term spikes like this is you can see increases in hospital admissions or hospital visits. So it can have a short-term effect on children, the elderly, and people with pre-existing conditions. We're also concerned about smoke, this type of smoke, incomplete combustion, because it contains a number of other pollutants. It also contains nitrogen oxides, volatile organic compounds. Now that usually comes even off your tailpipe in your car. You get those, and they do form ozone. Carbon monoxide, so that's a product of incomplete combustion. But some other products of incomplete combustion are actually toxic to human health. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, dioxins, and furans, they've all been found in this type of wood smoke before now. So we're concerned about the whole mix. How do we reduce those emissions? Well, ideally, we wouldn't burn in the first place. You chip the material, reuse it, or take it to one of the composting facilities and have it as part of the carbon that's needed when we compost food waste and other things. But that's not always possible. It's not always feasible. So we do ask that people use best burning technology and best burning practices. Well, what are those? Best burning technology is essentially this is a diagram of a pretty skookum burn boss. that's mobile. And it doesn't have a lid on it. It uses an air curtain, so it forces air over the top. And what that does is it forms a pseudo lid, if you will, and it keeps the larger particles and larger molecules, like the products of incomplete combustion, the PAHs, they're large particles. It keeps them, doesn't let them out, forces them back down to reburn. So it promotes complete combustion. That's ideal, but it's expensive. So typically we only require that sort of technology for really large land clearing burns. They tend to occur only once, and it can be a lot of material. So that's not what we're talking about with a smaller open burn typically. For those, we typically are looking more at trying to make sure that, like you would with a fireplace or a wood stove, you want to make sure you're only burning clean, dry vegetation. You don't want to burn huge logs. You want to burn things, break it down into smaller pieces. And ideally, you would use something like a brush fan or a blower, similar to the one that's illustrated here. And what that does is it adds more oxygen to the fire, makes it burn hotter, which promotes complete combustion. And also it means if it's burning hotter, the smoke is going to rise and it's going to disperse better. And we also ask people to locate piles as far as possible on their land from homes, school, roads, and to burn when the smoke is likely to rise by phoning Metro Vancouver's open burn advisory line. So, and I was just a bit of feedback. We did receive some feedback when we were talking to the various agricultural advisory committees that it'd be really useful if we could let businesses know where they can rent equipment like chippers and brush fans. And so we've done that. We did some research and we've put it up online on the Metro Vancouver website. And the fans do cost between $40 to $100 per day to rent, or about $120 to $400 to a week to rent. And we did receive feedback then that that's still pretty expensive. Couldn't Metro Vancouver just provide that equipment? So we did go back and we looked into that. And legally, we can't just supply equipment to businesses, but we could provide money to a nonprofit or charitable organization. So we have applied to Metro Vancouver's Sustainable Innovation Fund for monies to do a pilot project to see if we can find a nonprofit that we could work with and do a pilot program to see if we could improve and offer at least very low cost chipping to farmers. So Metro Vancouver's air quality management bylaw does prohibit open burning by a business unless it's authorized by an open burn approval. This isn't a new prohibition. That bylaw was issued back in 2008. It's just that up until recently, in fact, up until this fall, we've taken a more reactive approach where we've received complaints or officers have noted something that's clearly egregious, like the fires that we could see in Richmond from our office. We acted then and promoted compliance with the bylaw. But it was decided that because wood burning is becoming a larger and larger component of the emission inventory for particulate matter within the region, because everything else is going down, we're decreasing emissions elsewhere, it's important for us to look at this and to in fact enforce the bylaw, promote and compliance with the bylaw, which starts with education. We have developed our application for air quality permits is very complex. And so we developed a much simpler application form for open burning approvals. It's available on our website. Officers carry copies with them. They're in our vehicles as well. And it can be found just by using the search term open burning approval. We're already on version 2 of this application form because we've made it even more simple. We just ask things like what to describe what the material they're going to burn, the number and the size of piles, how long they want to burn, they think it'll take to burn, and what sort of window they're looking for, because it's often difficult in winter to get a day where the open burn advisory says it's okay to burn. Where's the distance to the nearest residence or school, alternative measures they've considered, such as the things we talked about, chipping, etc., and what they intend to do to minimize emissions. Are they planning on using a brush fan? Will they stop adding fuel 2 hours before sunset? That sort of thing. And then our open burn approvals are also they're site specific, but they're still fairly simple. They're typically just a couple of pages. And the requirements are things like to phone Metro Vancouver's open burn advisory to see whether or not it's a good day to burn, to use a brush fan. It's all the things that I was talking about. One that I haven't mentioned before is that we do require someone to be on site at all times, and typically fire departments want to see that as well. So they're fairly simple things that we put in there. There are some exemptions. We also hear concerns, well, what about if it's invasive species? That's exempt from the bylaw. And sometimes we hear about, what if it's a crop that's got a disease? The only thing that can be done is to burn it. Well, that would likely be exempted too. And then also there's often concerns we've heard. We have also, since this presentation was made to your Agriculture Advisory and Economic Enhancement Committee, we have reached out to a lot of the fire departments, including the fire department at the Township of Langley, asked them to also provide our information when both on the websites of the municipalities, but also on their application forms for burn permits, so that there's more information out there. And they certainly have the concern about the potential for wildfires or the need to control excess brush and that sort of thing. And a lot of that would be exempted from our bylaw. Although that said, we would hope that it would still be burnt on a day that's reasonable for burning, and when the wind direction isn't blowing towards schools, etc. So I think I've gone through all the things as well, had a little list of extra things that we have done based on the feedback that we've received to date. Oh, one other piece that the fire department said, that our open burn advisory message was confusing because we weren't considering the message of the previous day. And so sometimes we were saying it was okay to add fuel to a fire when they hadn't been allowed to even start a fire for days. So we're in the process of changing that as well. So that's my presentation.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. It's very informative on what you're doing to mitigate the issues around fires and the pollutants. So thank you. A couple of questions from Council. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you very much. I can barely see you above the monitor, but thank you. It was very helpful. I've actually been appointed to the Climate Action Committee, and I know that's one of our mandates is to look at the airshed. And I know that the fine particulate matter is becoming more of a problem as we understand from a scientific point of view the health concerns that are involved in that. And I also know that we've had some recent discussions with, I believe, the fire chief and people in our administrative side, and speaking with Metro about some of the strategies that we could pursue in the township. And I know that as you're addressing, there are opportunities to use other technologies. However, there is a price attached. And so I like the idea of potentially having a co-op because, for example, in the Okanagan, they bring a chipper to your site. And so they financially incentivize that. So people would use that. If I could just comment, I think my overall thought about it is that it's a really good policy goal to pursue this because best management practices from an agricultural point of view in particular continue to change and evolve. And so I think that we really need to look at that as opportunities to reduce, probably in a multi-pronged approach, to get the right conditions for burning, the right technologies, but also to help to reduce that and look at other ways that agricultural waste can be disposed of without putting it into our environment. So thank you.
Councillor Richter.
Yes, and I wanted to thank you as well, too. I know that when you came and spoke with the Ag Advisory and Economic Enhancement Committee, they were really, really impressed with the presentation and actually quite informed, because I don't think a lot of them were aware of the health issues attached to particulate. So thank you for coming and sharing those with us, and I'm very supportive of what it is that you're trying to do here, and I hope we can make it work for our lands here as well.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, I really appreciate you coming as well. I do have to ask you questions that regarding it. We're a child of the province. Does the agricultural land reserve or the right to farm, does that trump what you folks are doing?
Through the chair, it doesn't. We still have jurisdiction over, even if it's farm emissions. And in fact, we have an emission regulation that is for agricultural boilers and heaters. The one exemption that is in our bylaw that's related to agriculture has to do with basically dust when you're tilling soil. So there is mention of that as well. But where a farm is considered a business, it is definitely scoped within our bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I don't have any further questions. So thank you for your presentation.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is our delegations, and we have Parmajit Dada here to delegate to council. Please come forward. Okay, and under delegations, you have 5 minutes to present, and so.
Good evening, respected Mayor Jack Froese and respected councillors, all the guests present here.
You just maybe stand in front of the mic, or you can stand in front of the mic to the. Right there. Or do you want to? Yeah, there you go. If you just stand in front of that's perfect. Thank you.
I have to turn on. It's ready. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for having. I'm presenting you a new business in the field of advertisement. And I have a new company, Green Canada World Science Limited. It will be placing you an opportunity for new business, anti-glare, latest digital billboard advertisement in the city of Langley Township. It will not only create new job opportunities in the city of Township of Langley, we will share millions of dollars of revenue with our investment for the city, for the development, for they can use the utilized money for their own development of the city. Plus, it will save the environment, trees, paper, and keep the city clean. Most of the cities in British Columbia and in Canada have this business running very successfully, and they are getting in return a good revenue where they are utilizing for the benefit of the city as part of extra income. And I request very respected mayor and the councillors to permit us a license and give this permission to put this advertising latest technology, which will be the first of its kind in Canada. At the moment, the technologies, the billboards which are in British Columbia are almost 7-8 years. These ones which we would be installing, if the city council and the mayor council permits us, will be the latest and anti-glare, which don't have any side effects while viewing those advertisements. And plus, we will be giving the city of Langley Township the benefit of displaying their any kind of messages free on those billboards. Plus, any emergency hazards or that kind of scenario, any messages we can display immediately 24/7 on those billboards. So I request the council and the mayor for having reviewed this and give us a permission to give a license to place this billboard. Thank you very much. And I would like to display the video.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I do have some questions from Council. Councillor Richter.
Yes. So what's the actual size of these?
It depends whatever the cities, the engineering development department can sit down. I can sit down with them. And the cities which didn't have in the past, like town of Langley Township, they also amended the situation or the law there, and they are accepting those billboards and in return getting a big amount of income. Plus, it makes the city stand along with the smart cities of the world. Because
Okay, but on average, how big are, how high are they?
In some cities, they are about 20 by 10 feet. Some has even smaller. And the biggest on the near the highways on the city's land are 14 by 48 feet.
48. And how tall are they? Like
It depends.
How many feet off the ground?
It's not that it's around, you can say, about 20 feet.
20 feet off the
Yeah.
ground? Okay. Now, how many of these did you envision putting into our community?
Normally, at the moment in the cities in British Columbia, there are about 4 billboards on an average, but some have more than 4 also.
Okay, so how many are you hoping to put into the township?
I will discuss, I can put as long as the city managers, development engineers consider I am ready to place as much as they want. If they want 4, I will go with 4. If they want more, I can go more.
Okay. And where were you hoping to locate these?
In the township premises of Langley City, there are some locations in which we have reviewed it after driving around. But when we sit down with the engineering and planning department, we can discuss whatever are good according to them.
Okay, so you've been driving around and you've found some spots where you'd like to
Yes.
put them. Where are those spots?
One is on the Fraser Highway where the city of Surrey ends, and another one is near on this side, number 10 highway on the premises of Langley Township where the city starts. And some near those on the other side of the Langley Township.
Okay. Is there any record or history of car accidents caused by these big flashing signs?
According to me, I have done a research since this business started around the world. There's not a single, if you look around the history of those kind of incidents, which was the reason behind an accident due to this distraction for these kind of billboards. And they have been approved by the federal Canadian government. Those are CSA certified. The screens, the digital billboards, which I would be putting on in Langley Township.
Okay. And now you mention it promotes city income. How exactly does it promote city income?
Nobody shares what you call other cities, but about myself, I can say I'm a straightforward person, that whatever income I know that it will be a big amount. The business people of Township of Langley and others also around the world will approach, and from that we can sit down with the city hall and discuss whatever best suitable, and definitely it will be our investment and we'll give the income, whatever we discuss with the city hall
Okay,
to
but
them.
what kind of deal do you have with other cities?
Most of cities have their own according to the time they got it. For example, others ones might have got it, but I can give in return a good, as I mentioned in my presentation, it will be around $1 million.
Per year? 1 million
Yes.
per year, okay.
Without any, you won't be investing, it will be all my investment, and I will guarantee that everything keeping in mind according to the law and safety wise. And this business is already running all around in Canada and elsewhere in the world.
Okay. And what cities in BC have these right now?
Many, Vancouver has, Richmond has, Surrey has this, New Westminster had it about a couple of years. First they had restrictions, and there are some other cities which have amended their law because they follow what's going on, getting an extra income, and plus saving trees and environment, keeping cities clean. And because in the past when they didn't have it, paper hoardings, they don't remove it, and extra work for the staff, plus mess up around 7-8 months or years also the posters are there. So this new technology can put any emergency. For example, one example I'll give you in US, there was a big flood storm, and there you can also go and search, research. You'll see that the billboards advertise in advance that this is a scenario in the weather, and people quickly found their safety places to get them safe.
Okay, great.
And
Thank you.
plus, the UNO Council is also considering a worldwide meeting in future where there was in Indonesia a very tsunami, big earthquake, and the storm where lots of people lost. So they didn't have that kind of technology on that side, and thinking about future plans, putting there also.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick question. Do you currently have some of these signs in other communities yourself, in your own business, or is this a business that you just now want to start?
I have launched this business after doing a 3-year research on this one, and the technology, which, as I mentioned in my presentation, will be the latest and the best one. The present one, already existing billboards, are 7-8 years old technology. Every year, technology changes. And I had a look of all these latest ones which are anti-glare, but this is the first one which will be in this city, and I'm going from other cities also.
Right. So, but do you have any billboards right now that you own, or no?
Not anymore.
Not right now. So this will be the start of it.
Yeah, this is the new business which we have stepped in after doing a 3-year homework on it, researching and ready to invest when the cities are ready for it.
Okay. Thank you. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no further questions. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so now we'll move on to reports to council. F1 is Agricultural Land Commission application 10368. Could I have a motion, please? Council? Council Long moves. Seconder? Need a second? Need a second. Council Kunst. Any discussion on F1? Council Richter?
Yeah, I note on page, let me just see, I just had it here, sorry. Page 7 of our report, that staff have a note here. Staff note that an identical subdivision application by the same owners was previously considered by council on October 20, 2017, and subsequently refused by the ALC on February 7th, 2018. If it's an identical application and it's already been refused by the ALC, why is this coming back to council?
Mr. Backen?
Your Worship, they simply applied again 1 year, more than 1 year after the last application, so I think that's the only threshold they have to meet for an ALC application.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now, I also note in the report that in the surrounding area, there are a number of large parcels like this. I am concerned that if we start splitting up these large parcels, if we allow this one to split, the rest of them are going to want to split too. Have we had any applications from the other ones?
No, Your Worship. I think there might be a slight distinction. We're certainly concerned as well about the potential for the impact on the other large properties. But this is in that area where we had traditionally approved these because of we'll call it the buffer zone that we've been trying to work. And some commissions have been endorsing that and some have not. So we're not too concerned about the precedent created for the large parcels because they're beyond the buffer zone that we've been contemplating. This one is within that historical buffer zone, and therefore the dark green on your screen, and therefore is something that would merit consideration as opposed to those areas that are beyond.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Arneson?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Following council discussion on this rather challenging topic from time to time with respect to the size of the lots that would be left after an application, I would like to actually make an amendment to the staff report to including a different wording option. So if I can just continue. That while the application complies with the provisions of the TOL zoning bylaws with respect to minimum parcel size, Council does not support the subdivision application on other grounds related to the township's agricultural viability strategy regarding the overall negative impact on agriculture arising from the subdivision of agricultural land. I'd like to make that amendment.
Okay, so wow, you added a lot of words to this thing, so I just...
Sorry. Shall I do it again?
Okay, so we'll just go through the amendment and then we'll get the wording now. Is there a second? Now that amendment, because we basically have it here and it says it in a few words, request consideration based on agricultural merits. I think we've kind of covered it, but.
Well, I disagree in the sense that it's true that agricultural merits are something that will be considered by the Agricultural Land Commission, but it's within the township's purview to look at our own local government policies and make a determination as to whether or not we want to put it forward. So I think the challenge is that if it meets the minimum parcel size, then what are we basing our decision on? And I think it is of value to the Agricultural Land Commission to know that if council deems it appropriate, that we don't support this application because it does lead to the erosion of the size of our agricultural land base.
Okay, Mr. Backen?
Yeah.
Sure. Just let me get your mic on.
Okay. So is this a strike and replace? So you're striking the recommendation and replacing it with your wording?
I'm leaving the recommendation while the application complies with the provisions of the TOL zoning bylaws with respect to minimum parcel size. So the addition is council does not support the subdivision. So it's not striking it out, it's adding language that is reflective of the fact that it does meet the minimum parcel size. But on the other hand, if approved by council, we do not support this application because of the breaking down of the agricultural land.
Okay. Okay. First of all, this is extremely confusing to me as a chair. We're having a motion where you want to put a negative inside the motion. Either we approve it or we don't approve it. So I think one or the other, but I'm going to hear from Mr. Backen first.
Just to clarify, it certainly is a creative and well-intentioned way to deal with the conflict council deals with. But if I replay it, what I'm hearing is that the motion, that the application complies with our zoning bylaws, but we're opposed effectively to the application because it doesn't comply with other broader policy considerations. If that were to be successful, the next step would then, I think, be to change our bylaw framework to make sure that we don't allow these sorts of subdivisions to occur, because I think the short answer is council does have the jurisdiction to amend its OCP or its zoning bylaws to change the parcel size, and I think we're trying to do, with a very well-intentioned and creative way, is to achieve that, and I don't know if that'll be successful at the end of the day. I think we are better off, and this may be the council to do it, to take head-on the rezoning of some of these rural areas in terms of their minimum lot size and to increase them.
So on this amendment, because it basically says that it complies with parcel size, but we don't approve it. Either we're approving this or we're not approving it. So I'm going to rule that just out of order. I'd be happy to have, if you want to have a motion subsequent to this motion in other business that addresses what Mr. Backen is talking about, that's one thing. But to say that we say it complies, but we don't approve of it, why don't we just say we don't approve of this? To me, that I think I'm going to rule against this amendment. I think it could stand on its own as a second motion. So with that, I'll move on to Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I guess my question was back around the fact that it's already been turned down by the Agricultural Land Commission, and so the fact that it's coming back to council is asking us to once again restate that it meets our meets our minimum lot size and bylaws, and we're having to restate that. Is that in the correct way of phrasing what's happening here? That they were asked after a year that we just have to restate it, or can our original position just not hold? Why does it not hold up even after a year that it continues to hold?
It's under the legislation.
Your Worship, the position we take is consistent in both applications. The distinction is that this is a subsequent application, so therefore the legislation, the Agricultural Land Commission legislation, requires council to deliberate on each application. I think the real crux of the issue here, there's two issues in terms of the rural lot size that exists, but also in this process, why does the Land Commission not simply accept our OCP or our rural plan? And to be fair to them, that may depend upon their legislation as well, where there is some requirements at the provincial level that they were intended to meet. So it's a bit of an anomaly that we have from some very old legislation.
Okay.
Councillor Long?
Thanks, Your Worship. It looks to me on Google Earth that you can see the blueberry farms, blueberry farms in the whole back area, right? And there's 2 driveways into the property. So this is, the subdivision doesn't necessarily preclude that the properties won't continue to be farmed. In fact, I'm not sure why they wouldn't be. I think what it does do is provides now 2 farms instead of 1, right? And so, I mean, you know, sometimes it's more economical to have 2 farms than 1 because it takes all that work and efforts to farm the property. So I don't see any intention here to stop farming. It does comply, and the decision is with the ALC. But I was also under the impression that there was a 5-year moratorium in going back to the ALC. Is there anything, Your Worship, through you to staff that?
Worship, there are changing and evolving rules, but my understanding was that was actually for exclusions.
Oh, yes.
For some of the subdivisions, it was more.
Thank you.
More
That's
soon.
correct. Yeah. So this is not an exclusion. This is to make maybe farming a bit more economical.
Just to elaborate why this has this designation in the township's OCP is simply because it was deemed, as that map showed in the darker green area, to be a transition area from some of the smaller to the larger lots. So that was something that we'd worked out with the commission many, many years ago. And as time has evolved, they have migrated away from that position somewhat for their own reasons, perhaps based on agricultural merits. But our policy scheme still remains the same, hence why the resolutions or the recommended resolutions remain the same.
Yeah, I mean, there seems to be, Worship, a feeling that I'm getting from council that this is not going to be farmed any longer, and it's still in the ALR. So I would support it.
Okay. Councillor Ferguson?
There's certainly a lot of dialogue on this particular application, as perhaps there need to be. I was wondering, after looking at all the dialogue with, being here a year or 2 years and not approved then, and also, if I may, through the chair to the staff, isn't there a new application process through the ALC in that they ask for input from local governments, but they'll apply or proceed regardless, if I may?
Your Worship, it may be alluding to the fact that historically sometimes the applicants could go directly to the ALC. The legislation, I think regulations were changed a few years ago to require that it go through the municipal council first. Effectively, we think it was to make sure that it was compliant with the local council's zoning bylaws and regulations. They may have been getting applications coming from other parties historically in other jurisdictions that were not in conformance with the local plans and bylaws. So that step was introduced. That has had some impact, I think, on the workflow of the Agricultural Land Commission, but it has also meant that increased workflow for the township or other jurisdictions as to providing this preliminary opinion, especially with their time frame for reconsideration, whereas we see here it's back a little more than a year later.
Okay, that was a long answer. If I may, I think that it might be, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to vote against this and say that he can still proceed, but it might give themselves a little bit more time to let the dust clear, because there has been a lot of changes from what I understand from the ALC, and they're not really approving too many applications nowadays, and it might be a benefit to sit back and wait and go down there and talk to them and find out whether they would do it and get a little bit more of the support from them prior to coming. That's just my personal opinion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Kunst?
I'd just like to know why it wasn't approved in the first place, and if there was something that's changed.
Yep. Your Worship, we can only infer that the Commission did not approve it because it didn't feel that it had merit on its agriculture. It wasn't of merit on the basis of the agricultural considerations. That's their jurisdiction. Our jurisdiction is, does it comply with our zoning bylaw and OCP? So we don't know if the applicants had discussions with them, whether they made some further enhancements to it, if they had those considerations. Our focus would be limited to what our zoning and OCP says. And just going back to Councillor Ferguson's comments, totally agree. Our challenge is, and when we make statements, though, that something does not comply, and if we can't with our rural plan or our OCP or bylaws, then it's simply incumbent upon us to actually explain why it doesn't comply, or more importantly, change the legislative scheme, which we've been wrestling with for some time, to make for larger parcel sizes, which would mean a rezoning or an OCP redesignation to most of the rural area and the ensuing public hearings. That's our challenge between the rock and the hard place.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Arneson?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. In all deference to the fact that the original amending language was ruled out of order, and apparently there is a larger conversation to be had, which I understand. I still believe there's a lot of merit to continue to discuss this, because in putting this language forward, my direct reference was to our own agricultural viability strategy, which was endorsed by Council, and it expressly says, and in that case it just refers to exclusion applications, that the Agricultural Land Commission wants to hear what local governments feel and whether or not they support an application. So I don't know what it'll look like, and I will try and work with staff to bring something forward so that we can have adequate structure to something that will result in what I believe is what Council's original intention was, and also the Agricultural Land Commission, because what I really reject is the fact that applications can continue to go forward without any other significant or substantive changes, and we are undermining not only our resources but those of the Agricultural Land Commission that are already stretched. So I don't support that, and I will be looking at something else to bring forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? So I'd like to just say that this isn't an exclusion. This is a subdivision, and it's a subdivision that is allowed within that zoning, and all Council is doing is saying to the Agricultural Land Commission that this is a subdivision that is allowed within our own zoning, which has had public consultation, which has had approval by Council, and that we're in no way saying, making an opinion on the farming viability of it. I farm on 7 acres, and perhaps there are those that say I should be farming on 100 acres, but I farm quite successfully on 7 acres, and I'm happy that it was a piece of property I could afford that was small enough. But our job here is not to determine the agricultural viability of this. That is up to the Agricultural Land Commission, and in their past history, as we know from this particular one, that they've ruled against it, and that's their role. It's not our role. We do have sound agriculture policies in the Township of Langley, and I think, and there's also a desire for us to encourage young farmers to get involved, and if there are no opportunities for them to buy properties that they can afford that are smaller, they're going to have a hard time getting started. All we're doing here is saying that this complies with our zoning. That's it. That's our role, and that's why the Agricultural Land Commission has asked municipal councils to do that, because as Mr. Backen stated, their workflow was probably higher where folks were bringing applications that didn't comply with the municipal zoning, and so then they asked municipal councils to ensure that those applications that go forward do comply. And I've seen applications come to this table that didn't comply, and we've turned them down. And it is the right of a property owner to put that application in front of this council. But if it doesn't comply, we will turn it down. This one complies, and by turning it down, we're actually going against what our council in the past has approved, and after public consultation in our zoning bylaws. So with that, I'll call a question on F1. And it carries with Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Richter, Councillor Arneson opposed. And move on to F2. This is a 2019 budget pre-approval request for transportation improvement projects. And the intersection improvements at 216th and Glover Road, I understand, is a matching from the province, so $1 million from the province to $1 million from the Township of Langley. And the intersection improvements at 64 and 232. So that's moved by Councillor Long, second by Councillor Whitmarsh. Discussion, Councillor Richter.
Okay, I've got two questions. Looking at page 3 of the report, I see that the 216th Street and Glover Road improvement is partially funded by DCCs and then partially funded by operating contribution to capital. And I'm wondering why we're using operating contribution to capital to fund this.
Mr. Backen.
Your Worship, the DCC bylaw requires a minimum of 1% contribution from general revenue. In this case, the general revenue portion is being covered as part of the operating contribution to capital, which is essentially the transportation utility.
Okay, but they require 1%?
Minimum of 1%.
So why are we putting in more than the DCCs are putting in? Because we're putting in $574,000.
In the typical requirement, Your Worship, the minimum requirement is 1%. So that is applicable for the project at 64 Avenue and 232nd Street. However, For other projects, the DCC program does contemplate larger contributions from other sources. That's based on the understanding that the project, the capital improvement, will not benefit only new growth, but rather existing residents as well.
Okay. Well, if we're using operating contribution to capital for this, I'm wondering how come this takes priority over something like Old Yale Road, the resurfacing of Old Yale Road that people have been asking for years, and why aren't we pre-approving that with operating contribution to capital rather than this one?
This particular project, Your Worship, is part and parcel, if you will, of the 216 interchange project. In other words, the interchange at 216th, which is currently under construction, as you know, and scheduled to be completed later this year, cannot essentially function safely without this project also being completed.
Okay, so, but, all right, I can buy that, but what about the Old Yale Road? When's that going to come? Is that going to be in this next budget or not? Because they've been waiting for a long time to have that fixed.
Yeah, Mr. Bank, I believe it's in the budget where it falls on the line, above or below. I'm not sure. I haven't seen
The Worship, it's true. It's really a priority issue. In terms of recommendations of staff, they're based on the condition of the infrastructure, which that one's not very good. It's very poor. Also, usage, though, and importance to the overall network. The challenge that one has is it's always been very expensive given the impact on the overall network and usage, and as well as the concern about increasing traffic flow in that area. It will be before Council for consideration again this year, and it'll simply be a matter of Council determining if it's a higher priority than other things that are in the queue. As Mr. Seffi referenced, this one is of a high priority because of usage, because of safety, but also because of the cost sharing. When any application has cost sharing, as this one does, approximately $1 million from the province, it usually gets a higher ranking than those that don't have cost sharing, subject to health and safety concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long?
And this is pre-approval we're talking about. There's some urgency here, which Old Yale I don't has any urgency. But also in a memo we saw recently, this has now been added to the major road network. Is that correct? So this is not only provincial money coming in, but will there be also some other TransLink money perhaps that will help to improve? And I was confused with the memo because the memo on major road network talked about Highway 10 to Fraser Highway on 216th. This refers to Glover Road, which is Highway 10 connector in that area. So will there be some major road network funding also eligible to improve that intersection?
Your Worship, the memo that Councillor Long is referenced another section of 216th, which is not related to this particular intersection.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Councillor Whitmarsh?
Just related to Glover Road, is there what's the status of additional widening of Glover Road? I'm thinking particularly around this intersection of 216th. We have single lane traffic coming into double lane, and I'm wondering if that is some widening the Glover Road is at some point in time going to be done to help with address some of these issues as well.
Your Worship, as Council is aware, Glover Road, which is actually under provincial jurisdiction, is only 2 lanes in the Township of Langley. So historically, over the past number of years, we have been requesting consideration by the province, in particular the Ministry of Transportation, for widening of Highway 10 within the Township of Langley to make it equivalent and same standard as it is in other jurisdictions. And unfortunately that has not occurred yet. Having said that, as part of this project, a section of Glover Road or Highway 10 will be widened at the intersection to provide for a left turn movement onto 216th Street.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on F2. It carries unanimously. And we move on to G1 correspondence. This is from CP Rail, fitting, I guess, after that last discussion. And so it's a motion to receive. And also there's a clerk's note to request council consider approving a 20-minute presentation from Canadian Pacific. So if we could have a motion to receive and also a motion to request the presentation. So Councillor Whitmarsh and Councillor Long seconds. That's right. Discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question on G1. It carries unanimously. And G2 is Community Fundraising Events Partnership. That there's a motion to receive and also consider approving the Mayor's Charitable Gala throughout the term on the annual basis from 2019 to 2022. And just before I ask for the motion, there is a report, a memorandum that is a part of G3 that on the one that we did said would be a pilot project, 1 year for a first year gala of this nature, extremely successful. The funds raised close to $1 million, but with one significant donor. Without that significant donor, still over $100,000, which for a first-time gala is significant. Some galas don't even break even. And so I'm really proud of the work that the IAFF, the Charitable Foundation did, and the council support of this event. And $600,000, I believe, went to the hospital out of this charity, and the balance with the IAFF, or the Charitable Foundation, I should say. And I really do appreciate the work. So I'm going to ask for a motion first. Okay, Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Kunst. And Councillor Ferguson, do you wish to speak to it?
Oh, that's fine. That's just wanted to make the motion.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I'd like to ask for a clarification. Are we just receiving, or are we receiving and endorsing a partnership? And if we're receiving and endorsing a partnership, what is the meaning of the word partnership here? Does it mean we have to continue to provide clerical support for this?
Yeah, that's a good question. During the first one, and being a first one, there was certainly some clerical support. No additional staff were hired to do this. However, the staff in the Mayor's office worked very diligently to ensure that it was a good representation for the Township of Langley and for the firefighters charity. And so there was some work, but lessons were learned. We certainly know that going forward, and that I've had these discussions with I see Mr. Hewitson in the audience here regarding the charity taking on some of the roles that were taken on by the Mayor's office. Definitely, there'll still have to be some connection and assistance from the Mayor's office and from other departments in the township through this thing, but we want to put a bigger role on the committee, having gone through one. So obviously there were certainly a lot of lessons in growing, learning how to do this, but moving forward, I certainly understand what you're saying, and we want to make sure that the charity being successful can take on some of the extra work that was done.
Well, I mean, if the charity has made a profit of $835,000, roughly, I don't understand why taxpayers would subsidize a clerical position for this. It would seem to me the charity can provide its own clerical support.
That's right.
I have a question, is our staff able to continue on doing this work?
Yeah.
Because it did take up a lot of time, didn't it?
Yeah, that did, but we didn't hire any additional staff. So I agree with you that we want to make sure there's as much money goes to the charities. They're Langley charities. They do benefit the taxpayers and residents of the Township of Langley. But also, I hear you that we don't want to be expending taxpayers' dollars on a charity. We do, but there are other examples where through our granting program we are supporting other charities and other work in the township. However, I think this has been successful, and I really appreciate the work that the staff put in, because now it leads to other successful galas, but I had that discussion that there will be more taken on by the Charitable Foundation, and now that we've got a start. So,
okay, well, this is where I'm having difficulty with this motion, because the motion is not clear in the definition of the word partnership. Does it mean that we will continue to provide a staff person to do this, like the cost of staff time, or will we get compensated for staff time, or will they be providing staff time?
I don't believe we'll be compensated for the staff time. The staff did, as part of the regular duties, we didn't hire additional staff. It was in the Mayor's office, and through their work day, and I know some of them did put in some volunteer hours, but it wasn't an additional burden to the taxpayer. And and the reason it comes to council is because there is going to be some work by our municipalities. So,
well, can we get a more definitive motion here to say exactly how much money, how much taxpayers' property tax money will be spent on this partnership?
Mr. Vacken, what would you recommend? Because it's difficult to quantify when an email comes through and it's responded to or forwarded on by our staff to quantify the amount of time.
Your Worship, I think two comments. I think the discussion is suggesting that perhaps any township resources that are expended be recovered as a cost of the actual event itself. That may be the concept. And looking at the letter briefly, I think the letter is simply suggesting continuation of the relationship that existed as in the prior year, prior of this year, which would suggest that such costs would not be recovered. That would effectively be a contribution by the township. So I guess for clarity purposes, if the desire of council is to ensure that there's cost recovery for staff time, that the motion could simply be amended to stipulate that work on continued fundraising events, provided that any township costs or staff time be recovered from the proceeds of the event.
I would make that amendment.
Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Woodward seconds the amendment. And Councillor Long?
Well, I would like to have spoken to the original motion. I think it's a terrific event, and the letter talks specifically about a partnership with the mayor's office. Well, you run the mayor's office, Your Worship, so it's up to you to make sure everything comes out okay, and I guess it did last year. But the inference in this amendment is that there was some huge cost to the taxpayer to put on this event, which raised a pile of money for the community. So I guess I won't be supporting that, and I wish the motion wasn't even on the table. But I just wanted to speak to the original motion, and hopefully I'll have an opportunity to do that, because supporting the hospice beds is going to be a terrific benefit to our community, and I'm looking forward to speaking to that. But at this, the amendment, I don't think that there is any proof anywhere that this costs taxpayers any money. I know it cost me quite a bit of money to go, but I was happy to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson?
Oh yeah, I don't want to get mixed up in the quagmire of some staff time and resort. You know, it's interesting to note. I don't want to just use this particular function, but there's a lot of functions that happen in the community where members of our community, whether staff or other people, volunteers, come together and spend their own time and own resources, and it's a giving back to the community, and that's what these folks are doing. It was very successful, but Surrey's been doing it for years, and they work with contacts out of the mayor's office and working with volunteers within the organization. That's the same kind of template I think they're looking here, although it's going to be a Township of Langley type of template, which means people are putting their time up as volunteer time, as off-shift time, as to their resources, as their expertise, as whatever you want to call it, everywhere from collecting garbage to writing letters, to being on the phone, to driving their cars around, to selling tickets, to the whole list of things that go on. And much of that is done by volunteers, including folks at this table, and also members of our staff that put in volunteer time. So they're all doing it for the template of charity, and I think we're getting caught up in it. I think it's a great event. It's for charity, and I can't say enough about the fact that these folks want to do it, and they're going to put a lot of time into it. Believe me, they're going to put a lot. And so I guess believe members of council, and I know yourself, the mayor, and your family, and many of ours as well. Anyway, that's my point. I'll be voting against this amendment because I really don't think it's needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh?
Yeah, I think the mayor's office is for the benefit of our community, and the mayor determines what happens and the kinds of work that is most beneficial to our community in the mayor's office, and it was clear that there was no additional financial burden. Everything that's done in the mayor's office is done for the benefit of our community, and this is a significant event that benefits our community. So I certainly can't support this motion. I think the fact that we have cooperation indicated in the letter and we work towards a significant event is good, and we don't need some kinds of restrictions that prevents us from doing good for our community.
Thank you. Councillor Richter?
Well, it's all fine and dandy to say it's the mayor's office, but it's actually clerical and secretarial support people associated with the mayor's office who are paid for by township dollars that are doing a lot of this work. And I just want to know, because nowhere in the report does it say that the staff who did the work were consulted with, and do they have the time to do it again each year for another 4 years? Like, this is like writing an open-ended check of taxpayers' dollars, taking people away from the duties and the job classifications that they were hired for.
Thank you. No, I do appreciate that sentiment, and I know we made it very clear when we had the motion last year to move ahead with this that there would not be additional funds put out by the Township of Langley, that it would be there would be some labor, and that's why I appreciate that the Mayor's office, has been stated here, has some leeway, but that's why I bring this to Council too, because I believe that Council should be involved in Council, and I ask for Council's permission through a motion. I, on behalf of the Township of Langley residents, on behalf of the charity, and on behalf of the Mayor's office, ask Council. So it's not just me doing this. This motion's in front of Council for a reason, because I want to make sure that Council is aware. And there is some staff time, no question. Staff did help out. I know that last year, as I mentioned, staff did some extra work, and we recognized that because it was the first one and a one of. That now we want to move forward based on that same criteria, and that's what the report goes to. Mr. Backen, did you have something?
A reminder, Your Worship, I would have to verify the amount, but I do recall that there was an invoice issued for some of the staff time, but I do not know what percentage it was. So the charitable cause did pay for some of it, but I don't know the percentage.
Okay, thank you. So with that, this is the amendment. I'm going to call the question on G2 on the amendment. And the amendment fails with Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Kuntz, Mayor Froese, Councillor Woodward, Councillor Arneson, Councillor Long opposed. So we're back to the main motion. And Councillor Long, you're next on the speakers list.
Very happy to support it. I was just wondering too, though, as Councillor Ferguson has said, it happens all the time in Surrey, so maybe there's some advice we can get from the Surrey folks on how they do their thing. And I was going to ask where and when, but that's probably premature. But I'll look forward to the announcements as to where and when it'll be, so I can start saving to buy my ticket.
Mr. Hewitson, maybe he wants to just tell us where and when. We're working on the where.
It's Andy Hewitson from the firefighters. Just want to clarify some points here. So, to Councillor Richter's question, and as Mr. Backen has already alluded to, when we actually took staff to assist us at the events and such, we did. The township recovered full cost for that staffing. As far as accounting for some of the other time, again, there's a lot of volunteer time on both sides of the fence. So I know our members put thousands of hours in, as did a lot of the gals in the township on their own time. So I can't tell you what that exact number is. Was there a cost? I'm not sure, but the mayor and I have had a discussion. And we're definitely going to look at the model again this year. We're going to be addressing that so there is no burden. We're going to work our best to do any kind of cost recovery, as well as the three folks in the back there are going to be doing the bulk of the work this year. So if that's a concern, let me put your mind at ease that that's something we're definitely going to be addressing. As for the comments about modeling after Surrey, we're doing our very best, and we know Surrey's had a very successful model, and it's been a real partnership with the Mayor's office in Surrey, and it worked well for them for the past 20 years, and we're looking at doing it in a very similar fashion. So yes, to answer those questions, we are. So if there's any other questions, I'm right here. Feel free to ask. So
thank you, appreciate that. Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, I also want to echo I don't think my mic is, yes, it is. Yes, I want to echo the congratulations on the success of the first one. I think it was fantastic. It was great to be there as well. I had a great time. One of the concerns I had, though, was I certainly have no problem continuing and growing the event and the partnership. I just wanted to ask, though, since you're here, if there's been any consideration given to not timing it in the month of September, potentially having the event in November or in the spring instead of September. Has that been considered? Would that be a possibility?
I know you can add something. I know we talked about dates as a tough one because there's so many different galas that go on, and we didn't want to conflict with the hospital gala I know last year.
Yeah, September seems to be a really good spot, but I think the real thing here, until we get this motion moved forward, we haven't really done any serious planning and anything. I know there have been some preliminary dates discussed, but for some of the reasons that the mayor has mentioned, September does seem to be the good time for us. And as we found last year, I mean, it really worked out well for us with the people that typically attend those galas that time of the year. They kind of came into the one in the township first and really supported it very well. And just again, I want to just reiterate on the funds that all the funds that are being brought in by this stay in Langley. They're not being moved anywhere else but in Langley. We're creating an endowment fund, which will work in perpetuity to benefit the citizens of Langley long after old guys like me have retired. There'll be this fund will be in place, and it's definitely a move in the right direction. That's something that Surrey has done that they've found now has been extremely successful. So we're taking this long term. This is hopefully something I'll be coming back out of retirement in 20 years and watching take place. So
buying a ticket.
Yeah, I'll buy a ticket by then. But really appreciate your consideration. And again, we still haven't confirmed a date, and we'll consider that perhaps if it gets approved.
I'd like to clarify the reasons I'm asking about that. So I think that this coming up in 2022, for example, the election is actually 5 days sooner than this past one, and you end up having a gala that potentially can be politicized within a campaign period. So that's something I wanted to raise. It's something that I experienced a little bit, and I would prefer to not have the event brought into that. So I would prefer that if we're endorsing it all the way out to 2022, just to clarify fully, I don't want to see that happen in the month of September during an election period like we saw last time.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Consider that for at least that year. I think we can take that. No. Councillor Ferguson.
So it was a consideration. I don't know if we can make that a condition, or if you want me to not make that a condition. I'll follow your lead on it, but that's a major concern of mine.
Okay. Hey, Councillor Ferguson.
Oh yeah. I just want. Oh, you guys are always looking for suggestions, so I've gone to quite a few of those Surrey things. I'm always out of uniform, but I did want to say that I bent the ear of some of the folks up there, and when we go to Surrey, you buy their little packages. They're pushing them like crazy, of course. And there's always an opportunity to get a car or to get you buy one of those packages and there could be a prize in. And people love that little prize. I know I've got oil changes. I've got flowers for my wife. I've got, the list goes on, right? McDonald's hamburgers. You guys might want to think about that because people like when they're paying them $50 for something, like to get something back rather than you guys have one prize, I think, or something like that, whatever you had. That's just a suggestion. You heard it from me.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, so I trust that you're going to take that into advisement, but I think we are today approving or endorsing galas all the way out to 2022. So I would like to move that we make that a condition that they not be held during an election or campaign period. Sorry, not an election period, a campaign period. I'll second that. Thank you.
Okay, there's an amendment. Moved and seconded. Discussion on that. Councillor Long.
Why? I mean, the event sells out usually every year. I think it might be a better year that one it would sell out for sure because everybody will want to go. But I don't understand how the political part goes in, so I'm not going to be in favor of that.
Thank you, Councillor Richter.
Because I think it gives an unfair advantage to the incumbent mayor politically. Well, there's pictures in the newspaper of the mayors in tuxedo, and that's an unfair advantage. And that's not right. The playing field should be level for all mayor candidates in an election year.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, so I'll just clarify. I think that for me it was more about the perception. It was about how it can be perceived. That's all. And I really want to ensure that the event, because it is so cool and will go on for many, many years, that there isn't any potential for that perception to occur with any member of the public. So I am concerned about that perception and experience that to a small degree. So that's the rationale for it. And if it's defeated, then it's defeated. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Just for clarification, is this motion is calling for the campaign period, which is approximately 30 days before the election? That's what the motion is? Okay, thank you.
That's right, the election period.
Campaign period.
The election period.
Full year, so it's the campaign.
Oh, campaign period. Yeah, sorry. The election period is September 22nd.
If it's in September, it would be less than 30 days prior to the election, which I don't perceive, perception-wise, I don't think it's a good idea.
Just be before that. Yeah. All right. Okay. So on that amendment, calling the question. That's G2. And 1, 2, 3, 4, it fails on a tie. Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Whitmarsh, Mayor Froese, Councillor Long opposed. So back to the main motion. Councillor Long on the main motion. Did you wish to speak again?
No, I'm fine,
Okay,
thank
I'm going
you.
to call the question on G2. The main motion.
On my motion.
The main motion, that's right.
Oh, just a second, I made a mistake just a minute.
Okay.
You clear the screen.
No, you can just change your vote. You can just push the other button. I haven't, there, I haven't called it yet. I haven't done it yet. Okay. And it carries unanimously. And I can assure, I think that comments that were made by Councillor Woodward will certainly be taken into consideration. And that's a good comment.
Just want to say thank you very much. We appreciate it, and we will work with the partnership as the request said, and we're open to suggestions and input. And we do it by committee, so I believe, like as last time, each and every one of you are welcome to sit on the committee, and we definitely will address any concern and make sure this is a successful event for everybody in Langley, because it benefits Langley, especially with the new benefactor. The hospice will be a fantastic opportunity this year. So thank you very much on behalf of all the firefighters. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, so the next motion, G3, is just to receive. Could I have a motion to receipt? Councillor Long, second by Councillor Woodward. Discussion on receipt on G3. Seeing none, I'll call the question on G3. G3 receipt. It carries unanimously. Is there any other business? The delegation that was here, does anybody want to refer that to staff just to look into it further? Not so much that particular business, but just our policies around that. It might be something worthwhile looking into.
I'd make a motion to around those signs and what our policy in the township would be to have signs of that size around our township, what issues there might be.
Okay, so to refer it to staff then.
Refer it to staff.
Okay. Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Kunst. So Councillor Richter on that?
I'm opposed. I think those signs are horrendously large and intrusive, and they're probably fine for the 401 in Toronto, but they're not good enough for Langley. They're just intrusive.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's why we like to get a report from staff, I think, just to see what's all involved in that. So I'll call a question on that. I1. Just referral to staff, yeah. It carries with Councillor Richter. Councillor Long opposed? Or did you want to be opposed? They're good? Okay. Any other business? Seeing none, motion terminates. Councillor Whitmarsh, second by Councillor Kunst. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried.